Hey folks, I'm Mark Schweigert. I'm a program manager on the Power Customer Advisory team. We're a team inside the product group and inside of the business applications group at Microsoft. We work, primarily with customers adopting the Power Platform, and then serve as their, if you will, to oversimplify what we do, their liaison to feature teams to help drive feedback from them back into sort of improving the product while helping them, establish patterns and practices and set themselves on a course for successful adoption. And so one of the things that our team also does as a byproduct of the work we do with customers is we build something called the COE Starter Kit. And so we ourselves are doing application lifecycle management using Azure DevOps and using the solutioning system to build the Center of Excellence Starter Kit solutions that we release and make available, and have documentation on in docs.microsoft.com. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about ALM in the broader context of the platform, and then some of the things that we've been doing on the team to do ALM ourselves that we're planning on sharing with the community to essentially save time and get started faster with application lifecycle management using some of the stuff that we've built. Before Mike and Phil introduce themselves, I just want to call out the fact that Shan MacArthur has joined us as well. Shan needs no introduction, but if you've not familiar with Shan, he is a legend and a pioneer in the ALM space in what we now call Dataverse and Dataverse solutions before he came to Microsoft, and now is the program manager who leads and is responsible for the Dataverse solutions engine and driving the innovation across the Power Platform for all components of the Power Platform to participate in using the solutioning system, which is a significant part of the conversation we're going to have today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike and Phil.
Hey, my name is Phil Topnes. I'm on the PowerCat team that Mark so adequately described. Mike?
Michael Ox. I'm a vendor working with the PowerCat team right now, specifically on the ALM components that we're building for the COE Starter Kit. So I'm excited for us to kind of show you guys what we've been doing.
All right, so one of the things we wanted to do before we got started, we recognize that this audience is very familiar with solutions already, so we're gonna forego some of the solutions 101 fundamentals topics that we often do when we talk to customers about ALM. But what we found is that there are varying degrees of awareness of some of the recent ALM capabilities that have been announced that sort of support better, more healthy ALM in the platform end to end. And some of that started with announcement that has been referred to as modern solution import experience. But really, if you look at what the modern solution import experience is, if you just Bing or Google modern solution import experience Power Apps, the blog post on the Power Apps blog will be the first one that comes up. It's the culmination of a number of other platform capabilities surfaced through the modern solution import experience, namely things like environment variables and something that's also been announced in public preview called connection references. And these are two vital components of some of the things that customers have asked for to be able to do when it comes to ALM, including being able to have a formalized way of having different configuration values across different environments that can be surfaced through everything from model-driven apps to Canvas apps to Power Automate flows, et cetera. And then connection references decouple connections that Canvas apps and flows use from the reference to the connection, such that you can have different connections in different environments, and then as you import solutions into those environments, you can refer to the appropriate connection in the environment. And you can do it, we'll talk about how we're doing it in automated fashion. And so we on the COE Starter Kit are leveraging these capabilities in the COE Starter Kit, and we're also leveraging these capabilities in our Azure DevOps pipeline. So that's some of the stuff that we'll be talking about as well. Also wanted to call out, if you haven't been keeping up with the ALM space, we've recently announced a preview of GitHub Actions that allow you to do essentially build and deployment automation CI/CD from GitHub using GitHub's workflow technology. And then we've also announced a GitHub connector that is very useful in building things on top of GitHub through the Power Platform. And so Mike will be talking about a reference application that we've launched that demonstrates an example of doing so. And then last but certainly not least, the Azure DevOps tasks that Microsoft releases, typically referred to as the Power Platform build tools, continue to grow in terms of the task library. And that task library will continue to grow. And in fact, one of the things that our project that we'll be talking about has served to do is help sort of work with the Power Platform build tools task team to prioritize additional tasks that Microsoft will be releasing for folks like yourselves to use. In fact, the last 2 tasks that were released, we sort of helped drive that prioritization. And so when you think about what we're going to be showing next, and Phil will be talking through, and Mike and I will be talking through a lot of the output of what we do, because we work closely with the individual teams that have ALM responsibility, sort of gets fed back into the product through this effort that we're doing to help ensure that like real world end-to-end ALM scenarios are achievable through the Power Platform. So with that, I'll hand it over to Phil, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Mark. Like Mark said, there's a lot of people on the call that have a lot of experience in ALM. I wanted to do just a 5 minutes kind of fundamental on solutions in ALM, just to kind of bring everyone up to speed for the next level stuff that Mark and Mike are going to talk about. So I'm going to use this app as an example. This is my Catfisher app. It's a Canvas app that stores data in Dataverse. What it does, it downloads an AI-generated image of a cat, which, just total aside, and this is extra value for this session for you. It comes from this website. This X does not exist. These are AI-generated images of cats. There's AI-generated images of people, which, I mean, I could spend like all day just refreshing this. This is crazy. So what is this? So this Canvas app, you can name your cat, rate it. If it gets 5 stars, a flow kicks off and sends off an email alert to people. It's got a model-driven app, so you can manage all your cat records. So this whole thing is stored in a solution. So that's a solution here. So a solution is a bundle of different elements. We'll talk about them in a second. And here in my development environment, if I wanted to move this to another environment manually, I can export this. First, I'll publish it. When I publish it, any changes go down to the solution and also for users. So be careful, so that those changes will then appear in the solution that we're about to move to our test environment. And then once it's done publishing, we'll be able to export a solution file. Solution files come in 2 flavors, unmanaged.
Yeah, I think we lost Phil.
Was it just me, or did everybody lose network?
Just you.
Just you. Okay. Well, that's ideal. All right. So where were we? So we were exporting our solution here. That does explain why it failed to export.
Yeah, we lost you at the managed unmanaged part, so it was about 30 seconds.
I think you got the gist of that, though.
Darn cats.
Yeah, something about cats, something about solutions, something about exporting it. So what this did then is this exported a solution file.
This is what happens when you talk about managed solutions.
Or Canvas apps.
Media censorship.
All right, I'm just going to keep this moving. So you got all this cool stuff. They export into the solution file, which is a zip file. And so then if I wanted to move this into another environment, I can import that here. Moving quickly before it cuts down again. And then that will move all of those components, which, I like to point out that also includes like the schema, right? Like the tables that I'm using to store my cats and things like that. And so then we can import that over here and move it there. So really a lot of what we're talking about in ALM though is automating that. Now here's the connection references Mark mentioned too. So as I move this between environments, I can map these connections that my app uses to connections that are specific to that environment. Only on the first time. Then the second time, if they still exist, it'll just map them automatically and you don't have that manual step. So you can part of the ALM process is automating and standardizing this. And so here is an example of the DevOps tasks, Power Platform DevOps tasks. And so here we can see we install it. Let's just start this thing while we're doing this. And so it installs it. It's going to publish customizations just like we did manually. It's going to export it, which is what we did, and downloaded it here to my downloads folder. It's also going to run Power Platform Checker, which is some of the benefits of standardizing this, because then this can check if there's any higher critical issues and stop the process, so the developer has to take care of that before it unpacks and goes into source control. And that's a big difference of using this process than what I did manually, is because then all of this content that's in the zip file will get unzipped and put into source control, so that you can easily see where changes are made, revert back to older versions, and have all the goodness of source control, just like you would in any other programming language. And then similarly, you've got a pipeline here for releasing it, just like we imported it into my dev environment. And so I've got this pipeline that's underway here. That's going to, that's taking what I did and sending it out to QA. And then after that, this is the other one. This is the release pipeline. That's what I wanted to show. The release pipeline is going to take it out to QA and to prod. And so here's one that's underway. It's already gone to QA, and then it's got an approval step, so that once my QA team approves of it, it will deploy to prod. So you can see here it's deployed to my QA environment, and then with approval from my QA teams, the way I've got this configured, it will deploy to prod. And then the newest option here that Mark mentioned is the ability to use GitHub Actions. And so here I have, just like I did in DevOps, I've got my PowerCat solution exported into source control here in GitHub. And then GitHub has actions that will do the same sort of automation here. So exporting the solution, creating a new branch, and taking everything into source control. Take a look at this one here. All right, so it exported the solution, unpacked it, created a new branch, ran some checks, and then completed it. And so now I have this in my source control. And similarly in GitHub, I can create a new release. And then from the release, it will package everything up into a solution and deploy it to the environment. So you have that same sort of automation. You have just two different ways of doing that. And then what you're going to see from Mark and Mike is then some further automation to make this even easier to use on a day-to-day basis. So if you want to build some of this yourself, there's some really great labs for doing this. I'm just going to pop up the links here really quickly. So of course, you've got the page that Mark just showed, Power Platform/ALM. And then there's hands-on labs for both the DevOps tasks and the GitHub Actions at these two links. And so you could walk through and really get hands-on and build your own deployment from these. And so with that, and while my network held out, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Phil. You're still going to drive, though?
Happy to.
All right, cool. Next slide, please. All right, so one of the things I want to make sure people are aware of is that we have a fairly recently refreshed set of ALM patterns and practices published up on docs.microsoft.com. And we recognize, that for many people who read this that are brand new to ALM, it's a lot to consume, and then how to practically apply many of these things seems in some cases a daunting journey, if you will, right? And so one of the things that we've tried to do as the COE Starter Kit team is to follow these patterns and practices in how we build the solutions in the COE Starter Kit. And along the way, we happen to have built a bunch of pipelines and some Canvas app that has essentially helped us be more productive doing ALM over Azure DevOps in conjunction with the Power Platform. And so if you switch to the next slide, Phil, what we're doing is we're launching something that it will be part of the COE Starter Kit. And it'll just be another set of components of the COE Starter Kit, just like we have governance and administration components of the COE Starter Kit. We have a theming component of the COE Starter Kit. This will be a set of ALM components for the COE Starter Kit that ultimately will come in a few different forms, but one of the things we will be shipping is essentially our pipelines and our Canvas apps that we use to do ALM over the COE starter kit that effectively embody a lot of these patterns and practices that you would otherwise have to start from scratch with an empty pipeline and build a bunch of things. And I'll walk through in more detail kind of how that's all been put together. And so it's really sort of our goal, as with everything in the COE starter kit, to share sample implementations of how to use the Power Platform. And so in many ways, we're using the Power Platform to help us do ALM over the Power Platform. And so we will share our reference implementations, if you will, or sample implementations for you to either take and use as is, or use as a place to learn how to build your own pipelines and tools, or hunt and peck and grab little things that we're doing out of our pipelines and bring them into your pipelines, right? You can choose to use our sample implementation how you see fit, but it will also kind of work, in a full end-to-end state, when we launch it, right? And so it's going to come in a few different forms, both these Azure DevOps pipelines and eventually GitHub workflow templates that basically show you examples of what we do for our own ALM. It's all going to be grounded in the solution engine and the solution infrastructure that is the foundation of ALM for the future of the Power Platform. We will have what we call sort of a canonical app. It will be a Dataverse solution, or perhaps multiple solutions, where we show you the app itself won't be of significance. It will really just exist to exercise different components like connection references and environment variables and data source environment variables, which I'll be talking about later, in some way to then show you how you can exercise those things through deployment automation and a DevOps pipeline from dev to test to prod, et cetera. We're also building a reference application that manifests as a Canvas app that is really geared towards, frankly, folks like us on the COE starter kit and a lot of the folks on this call who are unafraid of words like Git and pull request and commit and branch and pipeline, et cetera, and want full control over the ALM process without any layers of abstraction, while still having some productivity, as well as a Canvas app that is really geared, again, a reference implementation that is geared towards putting a simplicity layer over ALM that maybe is more appropriate for a citizen developer persona, if you will, or somebody new to low-code technology that doesn't want to have to learn Git and commit and pipeline and those kinds of concepts and terms. And for those people, that learning curve is significant and steep. And really what they want to do is they want to build an app that has multiple Power Platform components in it and be able to move it from dev, test to prod without having to get deep on solutions and a number of other things. And so Mike will talk a little bit about that. And then ultimately, we're going to take everything that we've built and we're going to share it with the community through GitHub. And so, Phil, if you can just kind of, actually, I'll talk to that at the end. So if you can just fast forward to the demo slide for Mike, and Mike, if you want to jump into the Power Ops stuff, just in the interest of time. And so back up one. So one more. Sorry, one more. So we're calling this Power Ops. It's not an official brand or anything. We might change it, to just be something more generic so it doesn't confuse people. But this is the app, the reference app that is really geared towards that citizen developer maker who just wants more of an easy button approach to using solutions and promoting their app from dev to test to prod. And so with that, I'll hand over to Mike to kind of give you a peek into what Power Ops is.
Yep, let me share my screen. Yeah, so as Phil mentioned, and there may be some people on the call who aren't familiar with the COE starter kit, or sorry, as Mark mentioned and Phil mentioned. So as the newest member of the team and, being a vendor, I hadn't
I hadn't heard of the COE starter kit, to be honest with you, and don't tell Phil or Mark that, even though they're on this call. But the COE starter kit is basically, like Mark was saying, they're reference applications. They're ways of enabling organizations to take Power Platform and low code to their organization, and ways of, kind of filling in the gaps in some ways from the platform itself. And, if there's reports available, and there's, sort of, things that aren't necessarily obvious, and we're building on top of the Power Platform. So just like everybody here who's building stuff on top of the Power Platform, we're building on top of the Power Platform. And we're, discovering some of the gotchas along the way, and, trying to, make sure that we fill in those gaps along the way. So that's what the COE starter kit is. The ALM components are specifically geared towards not necessarily DevOps, but specifically towards ALM. So getting your solutions into source control, getting them pushed to different environments. And Power Ops, which came out, was soft released in December, but is public, is this application. And then Power Ops Plus is what Mark's going to talk about, and that's the more geared towards the classic developer code first type implementation of DevOps or ALM. This, as Mark mentioned, is geared towards that individual who's working at an organization, who's a maker, and they want to be able to source control their application, and B, push it from their dev to test to prod. Power Ops is built on top of the GitHub connectors. So currently Power Ops is GitHub focused. Power Ops Plus is Azure DevOps focused. Mark's going to show the difference between the two, but I just wanted to run through this, since it's out there, it's publicly available. It's something you can get started with on the GitHub side. The GitHub connectors were just released in December alongside of this reference application. So, it's brand new, and there are some limitations in the GitHub workflows and the actions that the Azure DevOps does have support for. So I'm just going to run through this real quick. I've got a couple of environments or projects set up. The way that this, and again, this is kind of geared towards the maker experience. You're at an organization, you want to have a little bit of governance, your admins want to have a little bit of governance over who's creating applications, who's deploying them to different environments and things like that. And, this is geared mostly towards that type of maker. So to get started, you'll create a new project. So I could say this is my, CRMUG DC, I'm going to say it's Q1 project. And I'll say I want to create a new app for CRMUG DC. Registrations. Let's say it's for registrations. So I'll create that project. Initially, that project is going to be in a pending state. So there are flows that run behind this application, this app, and this is all built in Power Apps. And the idea behind it, this Power Ops and Power Ops Plus, is that your makers are working in the Power Ops or the Power Apps environment, and rather than jumping over to GitHub or jumping over to Azure DevOps to do pull requests and deployments and run pipelines and things like that and run workflows, they can do it from here. So this is essentially a layer on top of GitHub Actions, GitHub repos, to allow you to do that quickly and allow sort of an abstraction from having to do all that for your makers. So what happens when I create that request to create a new project is over here. So I get an approval from Power Automate, and I happen to be the maker in this situation and the admin And when you set it up, you can set it up with a specific admin. You can set it up with a specific approver, as well as a deployment user. But in this case, I happen to be both of those. So I requested to create a project. I can approve this. I can say this looks good. Same as any other approval. Click approve. What's actually happening, or click submit. What's actually happening in the background, all of this is driven by Flow or by Power Automate. So if I go over here, let's just jump into solutions. And if I look at, it's actually called Power Platform GitHub ALM is the name of the solution currently. But if I go to the, let's see, go to the create project. So here it is, create project flow. So I can see there's one running here that I just launched a minute ago. So again, reference application. So if this isn't your process, if you wanted to take this and make it your own, maybe you wanted to have a different sort of approval process, you could do that. It's all, it's all low code. It's all in Power Automate. So you can see here that we actually, so we're actually running through it right now. We created a dev environment. We're actually creating an environment, a Dataverse environment in the background. We're creating a GitHub repo in the background at the same time, and running through these approvals. So I've got another one over here that's actually already built and already approved. So this is my UG demo. This one's already been approved. So once it's been approved, it'll actually show up as such. So you can see, this one was pending. This one's actually approved now. If I go to Open Project Solution, it'll take me to my solution. I can add existing components. I can create a new one. Maybe I want to create a app. Let's create a quick Canvas app in here. And we'll insert a label and we'll say, hello, UGDC. That looks good. Save that. All right. So one of the things that you have to do, so part of the setup is a little bit wonky. It depends on if you have a paid subscription to GitHub versus an unpaid subscription to GitHub. So there's certain variables that you have to set. So in my case, I have an unpaid subscription. It's telling me I have to go to my GitHub repo and actually set the password. These are secrets that are encrypted, but you have to set them in order to get the pipelines to work. So that's what this email is about. It's one of those things that is different from GitHub than it is from Azure DevOps is that the ability to use a service principal in GitHub is not as advanced as it is in Azure DevOps. So a lot of this is using username and password, not ideal, but that's the current state of things.
And just to be clear, service principal support is coming for the GitHub Actions as well. It's just not there yet.
Right. So that Mark will talk about that a little bit more detail soon. But one of the things you have to do is after your GitHub repo is created with Power Ops, you actually have to go set these secrets inside of your GitHub repo. If you have a paid account, you can actually set them at the organization level or at your account level, and you don't have to set them on a project by project basis. So just heads up on that. But I've got my Power Ops test here, and I'll show you basically how we deploy. And how am I doing on time right now? I don't want to take up too much time from.
You're
Mark.
good. You have until 8 p.m., so like 15 minutes left.
But Mark's up next. What time's the?
You guys are the last presentation, so if
I mean, you could talk all night if you wanted to. We'll just see who stays on.
All right, that sounds good. I'll do that. No, I don't want to upset Mark. All right, so I'm going to deploy this to tests. This is a new push to test. I'll say deploy. So what you're going to see is the deployment's running, right? So I made my changes inside of my dev environment, my new environment that got created. And now I'm going to push those changes, basically source control them in GitHub and push them to my test environment. Part of getting up and running with PowerOps is the setup. It's involved, the setup is, but it's not a lot of it's not as much as we have with PowerOps Plus right now. I'll just say that. But there is some setup involved with this, but once you have it deployed, you can use it for pretty much any environment that you want, right? Like, so you would deploy it once to a COA starter kit environment and then use it across your different environments. So that's kind of the idea is, the setup is a little bit involved. The nice thing about this is when you create a project, it'll push out all your GitHub workflows to a GitHub repository. It will create an environment for you. It will create a new solution for you. And the idea is behind that is just to get you up and running and say, okay, I'm ready to build something. I want to be able to, source control it and get it out to my environments. And, it's as easy as saying new project, get that approved, start working, and then do the deployment. So I'm going to jump over here real quick to my GitHub. It's not in this window. I've got a lot of windows open here. All right, so I've got an organization set up under my GitHub accounts called the Ox Family. This is where all the Ox kids and my wife and I keep all of our open source code. So I've got a CRMUG DC Q1 private repo now. I didn't create that ahead of time. It's actually, it was created for me. It's got workflows built into it for deploying to dev, deploying to test, and deploying to production. Mark's going to talk about this again a little bit more, but this is sort of the COE's process of doing ALM. Obviously, other people, you're going to want dev, QA, stage, and prod. This is just kind of our reference application for how we do ALM. So again, it could be extended, it could be modified for your organization. If I go to actions, I deploy that. Oh, I didn't deploy that one. Sorry, I deployed this one, my PowerOps test. Let's go look at actions. So you can actually see our pipeline running right now. So I've got a build running. It's exporting the solution right now. Eventually, it's going to send me a notification of whether it succeeded or failed. And after that, I can actually deploy it to production. And when you deploy it to production, it will send another notification or another approval to the admin to say, okay, Mike's ready to deploy this to production. Do you approve? And if you approve, it will go through the process again and push it from the test environment to production. So I think that's all I wanted to really show without stalling too much, waiting for these to finish. But the app itself will update its progress. Like I said, you will get notifications that say, hey, this succeeded or didn't succeed, and we'll give you a link to go kind of investigate why it did or why it didn't. Anything you guys wanted to add, Mark or Phil?
Oh, All right, I'll take over then, and I'll share my desktop.
Okay.
We'll go to the screen, and so just kind of want to put what Mike showed you in reference and context of what I'm going to show next. So what we call Power Ops, it's just a reference implementation, right? Is really, as Mike called out, is geared towards a certain persona, right? What I'm going to show you next is geared towards a different persona. It is geared towards, frankly, the persona of people that we have on the COE starter kit, right? Who want to use, are unafraid of words like source control and Git and branching and pull requests and that sort of thing, and want to be able to have full control over the ALM process with some productivity, right? And so I'm just going to jump to demos here. So what you're looking at is our Azure DevOps repo for the COE starter kit. And the way we organize, and by the way, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but all of this source code will be publicly available. We're moving to a full open source model for the COE starter kit. And if we have time at the end, I'll talk about that a little bit. But these ALM assets that we've built are actually part of the prerequisite for us to go to a full open source model, right? And if you look at this, we have folders primarily. Most of the folders in here represent solution packages. And if you were to, for example, expand this solution, you'll notice that something that I teased on Twitter that we would share, and we got permission to share this from the team who's building this. But you'll notice that we have full source control of Canvas apps, and this is a very simple app with just a single screen. But one of the things that we've been sort of exercising is the work that's been going on to make Canvas apps source control friendly. And one of the things I will tell you is this has been very useful for us as a team. I'm sure many of you who've worked with Canvas apps have done a bunch of work and painted yourself into a corner and didn't remember which version you saved that you need to go back to figure out where the working function code was, so you can sort of bring it forward. And this is the kind of problem source control systems solve. And so we follow a practice where people who are doing work commit often, the work that they're doing, and have the ability to go back to their commits and see, what was going on, what changes were made, and then, leverage the power of source control, everything from line by line traceability of who did what over time to like the big oops button to go back to 3 commits previously to find the working stuff, right? Before you do things like submit pull requests. And so in our repo, we have a set of pipelines that we've authored that are very templatized, right? They are both variable driven, meaning we pass Azure DevOps variables into them, and then they're templatized in the sense that, and there was a similar function in classic pipelines in Azure DevOps, but we used YAML pipelines for a number of reasons. One, because we can source control the changes to our pipelines. We can then give folks who want to learn from the work that we've done in our pipelines, we can just give you the YAML files, right? You can bring them into your own repo, point Azure DevOps to them, and basically use them as is. And so we've built a set of highly variable-driven, highly modularized through the concept of templates and YAML that allows one YAML file to then call another YAML file, passing parameters and variables to it, et cetera, right? And so we really think we've taken great care to make these things highly reusable so that they will work for any environment, any solution, and you can use them for any environment, any solution in your own ALM processes. And so on top of that, we've built this Canvas app. And this Canvas app is fundamentally basically a bridge between the maker experience and Azure DevOps, right? So for example, if you come into the solution package, it's fundamentally a Canvas app that has a custom connector over the Azure DevOps REST API. And the reason we chose a custom connector is because we're using a lot of the REST API calls that aren't available in the out-of-the-box Azure DevOps connector. And so we wrote a custom connector that makes a lot of calls to the Azure DevOps REST API. And then the Canvas app basically is our daily dev loop driver. So let's say, for example, I want to come in and work on something for the day. Or actually, let's start from the beginning. Let's say I'm a brand new developer. I just got a clean development environment, right? And I want to start some work. I can actually use this tool to go find the latest build, right? The latest from source control, grab the version, in this case, it's a bad example, but let's go with this one. I can grab the latest version, or I know that, I'm working off of a specific build that I want to do some work off in my branch, and I can click import, and that'll actually import that into my Dataverse environment. And so, as I mentioned, this thing is configured so you can point to any Azure DevOps organization, project, repo, right? And then you can, once you've done that, once the Azure DevOps organization has been configured with Power Platform service connections, we will then basically go find those service connections for the various environments, and you can point to any environment. So again, this tool has been written in a generic way, any environment, any unmanaged solution for you to kind of find the work that you want to do and start on it. And so this is just a list of the unmanaged solutions in the environment. I can search through them, etc., and then I can go find the solution that I want to work on. If I click Open Solution, it just takes me to the maker experience, right? I can come in here, I can edit an app. So let's say that I want to open this app. Sorry, I meant to have this preloaded and open, but I come in here, I can make a bunch of changes, right? Save and publish my changes. Then I go back to the app and I click push changes to get. And what this will do is it'll basically make a call to Azure DevOps passing, the branch that I want to push my changes to. And so in the sort of the typical case, most people get a work item, right? They get assigned some discrete unit of work. That's how we encourage people on our team to work, right? Not do a bunch of things and then try to check them into source control. Get assigned a discrete piece of work, do the work, commit it to source control. But I can come in here, I can create a new branch off of another branch, right? So I can call this, Mark SC dash, 123. Maybe that's the work item I'm working on. And then I can, associate the work with that work item. So I can say 123 and click commit. And this literally will then take these values, pass them off to the Azure DevOps pipeline and kick off the pipeline. And so in this case, we're not trying to replace what Azure DevOps does well. So if you want to see what's going on, you just click on this link and it'll actually take you to the pipeline execution that you just kicked off. And you can come in here and you can look at, for example, once the job queues up, you can look at the variables that were passed to the pipeline, etc. And so it'll run through, it'll extract the code, the solution, it'll unpack it, it will commit it to this new branch that gets created, and that branch becomes my safe space to continue working. And then as I do a little bit of additional work, I might want to push more changes, obviously, once this pipeline finishes. And so I can now, push to that working branch. In this case, in the interest of time, I'm kind of going through this fast, but the branch hasn't been created. But in our case, the app is smart enough to know once the branch is created that my initial commit to that working branch, right, my safe space to put my code associated with my work item is in a certain branch, so it'll remember that branch. And so from that point on, I can commit often to that branch. Once I'm ready, I think my work's complete. I've tested it in isolation, right? I can then create a pull request. And again, we're just using the Azure REST API to submit a pull request. And so I can say what my source branch is. And in this case, again, it will default to the branch that I've been working in. You can't see that live because it takes a little bit of time for this pipeline to run. But let's say that this was my working branch. It would have defaulted to that branch. And then I'm saying I want to pull my work into the target branch. And the way that we do branching, and again, we're not dictating this branching strategy to you because you can choose whatever branch you want. But the way we do branching is that we sort of have a main branch for our next release of the solution, what I often refer to as our vNext branch. So I'll submit a pull request there. When the pull request happens, we will then surface the status of the pull request in this UI. And again, you can go to a pull request. In this case, I will show you the pull request, a pull request that has already succeeded. But one of the things you'll notice is when we submit a pull request, we run a build, which means we take everything that's in source control, we pack it back into a solution, we attempt to import it into an environment to ensure that the managed solution will build. We then plan on showing examples of how to do things like unit testing of plugins, run unit tests for plugins, use the Canvas test automation to execute tests over Canvas, use things like Easy Repro to execute tests over model-driven apps, etc. And this is where you would validate that the work that the person who's submitting the code for review would be good, right? And so we also, when we do pull requests, we actually look at the files. We look at the files to see what's changed in them, what's the actual work the person's done. We look at like Canvas app screens, and we want to see that people are following good naming conventions in their Canvas apps, right? We want to see that they're doing things like not overly using things like for loops when you can do things like lookups, right? And so we look at whether or not good Canvas app patterns and practices and coding conventions are being used. And so we do all of these things as part of our pull request process. And once we validated that the work is good to go into our main branch, that's when we accept it and merge it into our main branch, for example. And so the app really, again, this app just serves as this driver to be able to, do your dev loop. And then once a pull request happens, we'll indicate for you that when your pull request is merged, it gets moved, the code is moved successfully into a test environment. And then we'll just sort of repeat that cycle. So again, we built this app fundamentally for ourselves and to make our ALM more productive. And we said, you know what, we should probably share this with other people who want to do the same things that we're doing so that they don't have to sort of stumble through the learning curve that it took us to build our pipelines and to build our Canvas app, et cetera. And so I'll switch back to slides and just kind of summarize by saying that everything that we've shown, we are on a path to open sourcing. And not only open sourcing the two apps that Mike and I showed, but open sourcing all of the COE starter kit, right? And obviously being able to do good ALM over the COE starter kit is paramount to us being able to then open source it. And so we're going to learn as we go. We're not going to say that this is going to be perfect, but it is our intent to be able to get to a place where we take contributions of all components of the COE starter kit, including what we've shown you today, but the other aspects of it as well, including contribution guides, et cetera. And for us, being able to do things like full source control of Canvas apps, being able to provide people the same pipelines that we use internally, right, to get started to be a contributor, right? All those things are a necessity for us to open source things. So this project serves numerous purposes, including helping us do ALM, sharing what we do with you, but also we would expect people who are going to contribute to the COE starter kit to basically get our pipelines up and running in their environments, right? Because we're going to expect them to test things out and do deployment automation, et cetera, to meet their own quality gates before, for example, they submit pull requests to us. And so the sharing of Canvas app source code was the thing that we teased on Twitter. That is coming very soon in an experimental form, and then it'll eventually go into a public preview and then eventually go into a GA form, but it will be out available to the public in an experimental form very soon. I won't commit to exact dates just yet, but in very short order. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about and summarize is, and I know we're 5 minutes over, so I do apologize, but some additional things that are coming. So one of the things that was mentioned in the data source environment variables blog post was one of the final things that kind of rounds out this ability to move things from different environments and change configuration values. And that is something called data source environment variables. And so imagine you have a connector that has the ability to point to different endpoints, right? And so when you move it from dev, test to prod, you want to use, dev dot myendpoint.com and test.myendpoint.com and prod.myendpoint.com. This notion of data source environment variables coupled with connection references and other and builds on top of the environment variables capability is sort of that last mile that enables many of the end-to-end configuration value changes across different environments, and that's coming soon. We teased the fact that we're going to have a YAML-based Canvas source file format that you'll be able to use. To be clear, when this capability comes out in the experimental form, it will be it will not be incorporated into tools like Solution Packager and the Power Apps CLI and the build tools and tasks. But the long-term roadmap to GA is to incorporate unpacking of Canvas apps in the tools that you're already familiar with. And then there's a lot of other things that we've experienced with customers, like end-to-end support for service principles, usage of service principles uniformly within your DevOps pipelines and your GitHub Actions workflows, right? Because service principles are often, especially in large enterprises, a table stake requirement as the identity you use from CI/CD pipeline automation. And so we've gone over 8 minutes now, so I'll pause there and kind of transition to the roundtable Q&A discussion.
Well, you didn't get to make your announcement. Are you gonna make your announcement, Mark?
I did. It was the Canvas app.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I missed it. My bad.
Yeah. So that's this right here, Canvas app source file, and I showed it in the demo as well, right? And so there'll be more to come in very short order. There'll be an announcement on the Power Apps blog about this, but this has been a long requested capability, is to be able to take not just have the MSAPP file in source control, but a full source control friendly format that represents essentially the source code of the Canvas app.
Cool.
Were there questions in the Q&A that we can answer now, or should I go back to the IM and look for questions to answer?
I've been trying to keep up with them.
Yeah, I think you've addressed all of them.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please, Rob.
Yeah, so one question that I had is, this is obviously great stuff. This is so needed. Where I've seen the most challenges, and I'm curious as to whether the degree to which this is addressed, is idiot proofing the solution itself. Most challenges from migration happen because dependencies haven't really been totally worked through. And there's some guidance that you get when you export and import. Frankly, the process of exporting and importing within the new Power Apps, Power Maker environment is much less useful, I think, than the old in terms of informed, providing informed data as to why something is not going to make the transition. Tell me a little bit about how much of the idiot proofing is being addressed.
So I would have to defer to Shan on the idiot proofing aspect of it, for just to coin your term. I will say for Power Ops,
way I can describe what I run into.
For Power Ops, for the reference applications that we're building, we can only leverage capabilities that the platform have to kind of simplify things. I think there's two aspects to idiot, to simplifying this stuff. One of them is, once you get good automation in place, in many cases, you start to learn where your things are broken, and because you have automation in place, the act of sort of fixing that, discovering that stuff, finding the problems, fixing them and ensuring that you don't continue those problems often solves itself, but that requires that one goes to the level of rigor and discipline to put good ALM in place in the first place, right?
Okay.
Then there's the aspect that I think Shan can possibly,
Yeah,
address. It is, are there
Yeah.
other things coming in the platform that might help, not allow people to break themselves into jail, right?
Yeah, so that's sort of where I was going to go next here is basically we've got some dedicated engineers here that we consider supportability as a key part of our fundamentals. And one of the metrics we're counting on a daily basis is our IPD or incidents per day, or basically you think of it as customer cases per day. And we're basically tracking down to less than 10 per day worldwide related to solutions. But the way we're doing this is triaging cases on a daily basis and analyzing root causes and putting them into themes and fixing those. So one of the themes that's actually right on the very top of our list right now that we're actually working through 3 or 4 improvements on is working with dependencies. So it's timely that you're asking this, because we are recognizing that our next best way to reduce customer pain is to make working with dependencies easier. There's quite a few things that are going on. In the past, you would have seen, a dependencies screen on import of, like, say, 50 or 100 different components that were missing and stuff like that, and you really couldn't make hide nor tails out of it. In reality, you probably had 1 or 2 managed solutions that were missing. So we're trying to drive towards customers that understand this and to basically direct to, oh, well, you actually have to install these 2 managed solutions instead of giving you a list of 100 components that are missing. We're also looking at how to change the maker experience so that we can have views of unpublished components, because if we don't publish a component, it's not going to be exported. So that's one thing that we're going to do. But the other thing is having customizations. So something we can easily identify what has a customization, what's not, and allow you to bulk add things that are customized and add them to your solution, which removes some of the dependency issues. One of the issues that are actually going through worldwide deployment right now is we've changed the mechanic that basically will drive towards when you are bringing in managed or components that have an unmanaged or active customization. When you're exporting, be able to identify and show those to you, because if they're unmanaged in your dev environment, they probably shouldn't be in your solution. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. We had a knock on the door.
I felt that way.
Dogs were doing their duty there. So we're working on making that a lot more effective and easy as well. We're also looking at if you have a dependency on an app source provided application, like say Field a project service or something like that, of driving the install links within the importer as well. There's quite a few things that we're doing, you can see, that are related to dependencies, inclusive of also making the dependency screens. There's a lot of screens that we filter out things that don't have UXs, but some of the filtering I think is a little overdone, and it doesn't give you all the information you need. So we're really focusing heavily on making sure that customers have the information at their fingertips, simplifying it and driving it towards the actions that you need to take, instead of just giving you a pile of unnecessary information that a regular user would not necessarily understand. So
yeah, I think. Oh no! Sorry. Yeah, I think I turned my volume down on this one. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah. And I was like, I think, and honestly, like, there's times where, you get a message on solution import or export or delete, where it's like you have dependencies, and it's like, go to the API, run this API call, and it'll tell you what those dependencies are, and that's.
The message for going to an API call, that one is top of my list of not, because that's not customer usable action.
Right.
Also, we do recognize that there's a gap between the maker experience today and the error details that it has and the legacy solution explorer. So that's also one of the top of the list things too. So you should see full parity in the maker experience than you'd already do in the legacy solution explorer too. You should also pay attention to what we're doing on the Dataverse for Teams, because we're actually simplifying solutions a bit. It still uses solutions behind the scenes, but a lot of things are automagic. But we're adding new capabilities, and some of the capabilities may be even to be able to partially import a solution. So if you only want to bring in yesterday's copy of the solution, but only bring in your one Canvas app, because that's the only thing you want to roll back to yesterday, you can be able to do that too. So there's lots of things we're changing in that also applies to the whole platform, and then we'll surface in the maker experience and the DevOps tooling as appropriate. So you should be able to see usable error messages with relevant information that give you good information as to what you need to do next, instead of cryptic stuff, calling APIs, or lack of any detail. Like those error messages are critical to our supportability theme. So we're making changes on a weekly basis on those, cleaning everything up as we go.
So Cole said he wants the progress indicator back, or Philip said he wanted the progress indicator back.
Oh, God.
How do we feel about that? Not coming back.
Especially when it gets all the way to the end and just crashes.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of just like, hey, it's coming, and then it fails, as opposed to, oh, it's almost done, and then it rolls.
Right.
It's the unwinding that I love.
We're making solutions a lot faster, so you may not need the progress indicator, because it should be going through so fast. So
There you go. Well, now you're starting to build stuff for me.
Thanks, Shan.
Yeah, thanks everyone. This was a great discussion. I really appreciate so much support in the chat, answering questions, and just this is an amazing meeting. So thank you guys so much for that. I think our next agenda item is just a roundtable discussion. So if anybody has any other questions or things we want to talk about, our next meeting will probably be sometime in March, but we don't yet have a date or speakers. So if you're interested in speaking or getting involved, please reach out to me or Aiden or Nelson, and we can get you scheduled and figure something out. But thanks everyone for coming, and feel free to stick on if you have any other topics that you want to talk about for our roundtable or for anything.
Yeah. And especially thank you again, Shan, Mark, Phil, Mike, and Rob and Cassandra for presenting. We appreciate all your time, and I think we really have some outstanding content this week. So thank you again.